As far as today's presentation, it is intended primarily for any technical or IT folks out there that might be part of an organization that is considering or about to embark on a global HR implementation. I assume many of you are probably folks that run S3 today, and we want to give an overview of what the team looks like, what the technologies look like, and what the project looks like. And we have two great presenters here today to do that. Mr. Jeremy Stoltzfus, Mr. Chip Cunningham. Together they have a vast amount of experience in implementing global HR and a lot of lessons learned. So look forward to hearing from them. And without further ado, I give you Chip and Jeremy.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for joining us here to talk a little bit about a subject about projects that I enjoy very much. I like the GHR implementations because they're multifaceted. They have a lot of idiosyncrasies. There's a lot of technology involved. There's a lot of people involved. I really enjoy doing these projects. So today we're going to talk a little bit, as Keith alluded to, the team. We're going to talk a little bit about planning and preparation, some of the training that your IT staff and folks will need to have. We'll deep dive a little bit into the technical components. We'll talk a little bit about design, some about testing, and then finally go live planning, execution, and a little bit about post-live stuff. So this is our about RPI slide. All right. So first thing we're going to talk about a little bit is the client team. So as I kind of said before, the client team is made up of a vast number of people. So,
yeah. So I mean, really, when you talk about a global HR implementation, you think of, okay, this is HR application. We definitely have to have all our HR stakeholders from the various business areas within HR. But because with global HR and the landmark applications, the technology component is so integral to the application, your IT team, your support staff really need to be heavily involved with this implementation as well. There is so many technical components that are just integrated with the application that it really does require 100% commitment from the entire team to be able to do this. And this does include your support team, so your system administrator and your internal resources that help with your interfaces, your extensions, configurations, and reporting and all of that as well.
So the best teams that I've been involved with are some that
Include Jeremy.
Definitely been involved with Jeremy when he was implementing global HR. But I've been involved with some teams, and they're like 100% committed, and they have the ability to make decisions and move the project forward.
Yeah. So we're going to go into a little bit of preparation and planning and what it takes as you embark on the global HR journey. Talk about the technology. So there's a lot of technology differences between Landmark applications and S3 applications. Landmark is a Java-based platform, so it is completely different, obviously, than the COBOL-based platform. A lot more flexible, extendable, and things like that, but there are several components such as the grid, process automation, which hopefully everybody has heard about by now and is familiar with. Configuration console is a great tool. There's a lot of components with security that need to be looked at and considered as well. There's the application itself, which really sits on top of that technology layer, but it's really, as I mentioned earlier, it's really the technology is such an integral part of the application. Really, to be able to deploy and understand the technology, you really have to have a good understanding of the application itself. And then the Spreadsheet Designer is similar to Microsoft add-ins, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But then, most of your system admins should already have a WebSphere, some sort of WebSphere knowledge, because LSF has been running on WebSphere for a long time now. Look at your, so as you begin this process and this project and you're exploring your current S3 Lawson HR implementation, you really kind of have to take this opportunity to inventory all of your RICE components. And when we say RICE, we refer to reports, interfaces, customizations, and extensions. So that's all of the things that you've done to your S3 Lawson system to make it your own, to match your business processes, for your users to get out the information that they need. So you really have to gather that and take a very good inventory, total inventory of everything that you have. you got to, as you're going through the project, you're then looking at each of those, and really kind of evaluating, do I still need these? Is it something that was really S3, very, very S3 specific, now that we had to customize, and now it's just built into the GHR application? You know, when you talk about interfaces, you know, especially with payroll type interfaces, you know, you have to kind of ask the question, do I keep that interface generated out of S3, or do we move it to GHR now? And even other things that may come out of that data. And
sometimes and to build on that a little bit for Jeremy, from what Jeremy said, sometimes the data is just not going to be in GHR anymore. So not going to be in S3 anymore. So it's got to move over to GHR.
Right.
One of the more important things that you need to map out is how the data is going to look during the timeline of the project, where the data is going to be, where you're going to be doing conversions, where you're going to do customization development, where you're going to have testers and training. And to map this out, we use what we call a product line strategy. And so what the product line strategy is, it kind of maps out the course of the project, and where at any given time you should be able to tell from the product line strategy where users should be testing, where development of interfaces should occur, where conversions need to occur. So it gives you kind of an overall almost timeline of kind of the data as it moves on.
And as we talk about product line strategy, one thing that's very critical throughout the project is what we refer to as a pristine environment. You want to keep your pristine. So this is largely your setup data, so no transactional data, but your setup and your configuration type things. And what that does is enable you to have a clean slate for each time you run through your conversion and testing. So you're not having to go in through all the setup screens and reconfigure all the options within the application.
So the pristine is going to be your jumping off point for all your conversions, right? So it's the baseline data, as Jeremy said, and we're going to migrate that to the different product lines when we start our conversions in the different product lines.
So we look at all the different, we'll say desktops, but really the different user interfaces that are available with the Global HR application and Landmark. So there's the rich client. So this is a fat client Java program that runs on your desktop, and it's updated via the web, but through an HTTPS, and it is served up through the Landmark grid. It is like I said, the fat client. All functionality is built into the rich client. The problem with that is, then you have to deploy that across your organization, perhaps. Typically, this is really for your core HR users. There's then the Java applet, which is deployed in a web browser. So it does require that Java plugin in your web browser, and it again requires it's a way to deliver that application to your end users. There's a lot. There's also the HTML5 option. So there's a lot to do with browser compatibility in HTML5 versus applets, and more and more the newer browsers now, of course, all support HTML5. But then it does give you a different interface and a different user experience. Then we also have, as I mentioned earlier, the Spreadsheet Designer, and this is this is part of Microsoft Excel, just similar to the Microsoft add-ins that we have used with the S3 product before.
We have a question.
Got a question? Can you elaborate on what is served up through applets?
If we're talking about the applet, it's a Java program, and it's basically it's like a view into the rich client. Not all the functionality is there, but it is browser-based.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the Java applet here, it really is the rich client, but just embedded into a applet within your web browser. So if you're using Mingle today, it's another icon at the top that then essentially launches the rich client within the browser. But it is the full functional rich client within the web browser.
Right.
Okay.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the technical components that we're going to have to touch and develop throughout the course of the project.
So as we look at the differences between S3 and the global HR, the landmark-based applications, S3, of course, as we know and love, is 4GL COBOL-based applications, over 20 million lines of S3 COBOL code.
And Lawson pattern language, landmark is written in Lawson pattern language, which is kind of a higher level Java language.
In S3, we made customizations. So we took that delivered S3 code that was sitting out on our servers, we tweaked it, we made copies of it, we developed code. So you had code developers sitting at your shop, maybe making these modifications. You're making changes directly to the COBOL code or creating brand new programs to extend the functionality of the system. You're also, in the case of employee self-service or manager self-service, you're going in and you're customizing, you're making modifications to those HTML and JavaScript files.
So on the landmark side, we don't do customizations anymore. We do configurations, and configurations are those same types of changes, but they don't ever change your base code. And configurations, you're able to make configurations in the configuration console, which is a point-and-click tool available through Rich Client, and like I said, it doesn't change the underlying code. It's just a configuration.
So Lawson Security, most of us have gone through a LAUA to Lawson Security migration in the S3 world, and if you remember, that was initially very painful because there was no templates delivered.
From the Landmark perspective, Landmark delivers templates. Those templates may need to be tweaked or changed, but they are it is a fully functioning security model.
And we touched on this briefly already, but the Microsoft add-ins product in S3.
And the Spreadsheet Designer on GHR.
Basically both
same thing.
Both the same thing, same purpose, but just different technology behind the scenes. On S3, we have when we talk about how data is stored, we talk about the database and the database tables.
So, and business classes are prevalent on Landmark, and what basically business classes is an object-oriented approach, which is code with a database table with underlying code for business functionality. Another question.
Another question. I have another question here. It says COBOL has what are called user exits to control specific elements on various screens. Does LPL have something equivalent through the configuration console?
So in version 11 of Landmark technology, there is something that is being introduced similar to user exit functionality in S3.
But when you run a process in Landmark, it kicks off a process flow, and so those changes, those programming changes, can be made on the underlying process flow.
And just right into this slide, basically from that, is here's the processes, the actions that are really kind of delivered with the application. So I know this is an eye chart, and that's done intentionally to just show the flexibility of the system and how much is really built into it. And the good thing is, if you have something that's not on this list, you can create additional ones very easily, again, using that configuration console utility. And that's where you extend that functionality. So essentially a user exit could be done via a process flow as well.
Right. One of the large buckets of work that will get done in the very beginning of your project are the conversions. So once we've got the pristine area set up, we need to convert our data from whatever the current system of record is into GHR. And then to do that, you import the data into business classes for each of the larger conversions: the employee and demographic data, the supervisors, the jobs, positions, and work assignments. And then once you've got that data imported into those business classes, you actually run load processes along with data maintenance programs to pull the data from those intermediary tables into your system. Yes, sir.
So this is a question that comes straight from me. Historically, some of the implementations that we've done, a lot of those conversions, at least more recently with add-ins and so forth, were being handled by some of the process and functional consultants. But I get the distinct impression that in global HR implementations, there's more of a technical component towards building that true conversion. It's not just a data massage. It's a
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a technical function because you're going to use some kind of a program, or whether it's a SSIS type program or it's Perl or even SQL to pull that data out. You're going to map it over and then you're going to put it into the system. One of the gotchas there is to be able to load it into the system, you have to have command line access. I mean, so you would have to give functional users the ability to modify commands using command line.
Question, good one. The list that we have there of the business classes, is that the recommended order?
No,
Okay.
not at all. Actually, it's completely opposite, wrong order. So,
There's an order.
yeah, there's an order, definitely. I think it's supervisor, jobs, positions, employees, work assignments, right? Something like that.
Something like that. Oh yeah. So we talked about configuration console. This is really a delivered tool that's part of the Landmark environment, and this allows you to make those configurations. We no longer do customizations, and so that's the message that Infor is relaying to us, and it's really allowing. So the configuration console really allows you to extend the functionality. I showed that list of services earlier. If you don't like those, you can add additional services, additional requests, additional actions using Configuration Console. And again, all of those additional actions that you may create can then kick off an additional process that you can create from scratch or use something that may be delivered that you just need to tweak. You're creating and updating security through Configuration Console. Configuration Console also allows you to create a web service. So you can expose certain parts of your system, creating a web service call, exposing a web service call. So maybe it's an external system that now has access to maybe query data, or maybe it's coming in from an identity system or your email system to update email addresses or things like that, where it can make those calls into your data. There's a cache management feature to manage the form cache and all of that. But then, of course, your configuration console, where a lot of your time will be spent, is modifying those forms and lists that the users interact with directly.
Right. So there's also something I'll point out on the screen, something called a personalization. And basically, I just want to reiterate what Jeremy said, is the whole purpose of configurations and personalizations are that we don't update that base code. And so the configurations live on top of the base code, and personalizations live on top of the configurations.
And the key takeaway from that is, as you go through applying a latest patch, those configurations are stored in the database. So they're retrieved and loaded into memory, but they're not touched by an upgrade.
Yep.
There is some validation that would need to be done to ensure that something doesn't break, but they're still there and preserved.
Yes, sir.
So I have another question related to the conversions. It's a good question. Does a conversion include PA history, pay rate, position? And those are sort of decisions that get made on whether you want to convert all that data. Obviously, there's a balance there on.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. Yes, you can convert history. It's through work assignments for position history. So you can do that, but it's kind of behooves you to maybe not go all the way back to the beginning of time, because you're still going to have your S3 system, but maybe pick a cutoff point where you say, okay, I can get most of the history I need to look at in GHR at this point, or maybe even you don't load any history. So it's something that your organization has to decide and talk through about what you want for history in GHR.
And the equation is basically an effort equation,
Right, yeah. It's right.
It's a lot of work to chug through the PA history and pull that information into the correct format and make sure your effective dates and all that are set properly. So.
Yeah, the key there is effective dates.
Yeah.
GHR is effective date driven, so.
Yeah.
Which is awesome from a functionality perspective,
Great.
but from a conversion perspective, it can trip you up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. So here's a slide basically on what Configuration Console can do for you. It provides a a GUI that allows you to make application modifications, whether it's to data areas or business class relations. It allows you to tweak and change your action requests. You do your routing for action requests, change your forms for action requests. It's where you make your security modification is in the configuration console. You're going to create and modify your security classes and roles, and then it allows you to create and modify web services that can update and pull landmark data. Another thing that needs to be taken into account when you do a GHR implementation is what we call the interface, right? It's the interface between GHR and S3. For most clients, most Infor clients, you're going to be coming from S3 as your system of record and moving to GHR as your system of record. The important thing there is that now we have two systems we got to keep updated, and the way we do that is the GHR to S3 interface. It basically exports your GHR data using IPA and imports it into Lawson S3 into the LT, LT programs and receiver tables. When codes aren't in sync between the two systems, it gives you a cross-reference business class that allows you to map value A in GHR to value B in S3. There's also a option to process immediately transactions as they occur. So as someone makes a change in GHR, it fires off a trigger which loads that data into S3, or batch, which gathers all the transactions at once and runs a scheduled process to put those into S3.
That's really driven by a business decision too, and how often, because it is still dependent on the process that needs to be run. So there's a batch job, the LT101, that needs to run on the S3 side as well. So it's really dependent on how often that process is run.
Right. And then finally, fields that get entered into GHR and you need an S3 for, say, payroll or your benefits, if your benefits are staying in S3. Those are generally user fields. You can map user fields to user fields, but those also are taken care of in the interface.
Look at some other delivered interfaces by the product. So with benefits now in GHR, there's an 834 interface to export your benefit data to your benefit carriers. With Infor's workforce management product, there's interfaces already written for that. Same with these other products listed here. They come as delivered process flows that you can tweak and modify if you need to, but they are delivered with base functionality right out of the box. So one of the interfaces that I mentioned earlier was the HTML5 user interface. So as I look at the GHR application within the HTML5 interface, there's this concept called configurable home pages. So an employee logs in and this is what they see. There's different components of this screen. So there's banner, image, and text, and this can really just be changed and modified. You can have multiple banners that it just automatically scrolls through. So this can be set up for announcements and things like that. If your employee data has profile pictures, this can be turned on or off and hidden. There's the role links on the left-hand side here, where depending on your security, this will show or hide. You can remove this, remove pages from here as well. And then you have your process links, which is the main content here of this section or of this page, where you can take things off. So there's a lot of options here, or maybe you're not using all of the modules yet, such as the performance and goals. Maybe that's later in your roadmap. So you can just pull that off of this page here as well. And then what's called the left anchor. And what this does is it's basically just text. So this example here that kind of comes delivered out of the box, it has a generic email address for contacting somebody for assistance and a phone number, things like that. So again, just additional information. So all of this is configurable and editable, and it's basically delivered in a zip file, and that zip file contains HTML and JavaScript. So again, we're not making changes to the base code, because this user interface, this is the HTML5 user interface, comes pre-built and packaged for you, but then you take it and you modify it and you basically upload it then into the system. And the nice thing about this is you can make these updates real time. So you make changes to your HTML and JavaScript, you zip it back up and you update it into your system. It's really just a record, so it gets updated into a business class. And then those updates happen immediately. Obviously, you want to test it and make sure it all works and not just tweak it and put it into production. Because if something's not right, if the directory structure is wrong, it will just render a blank page. So you want to obviously make sure you do something like that within your test environment first. Yes, we have a question.
A question that relates to the previous slide, that at the bottom you had all those icons. If you want to add another menu item at the bottom, is there a supply of images to use?
There are some images that get put in here. With the zip file, you can add additional images into the zip file and reference those images.
But you have to create them.
Yeah, but there is, and it's probably just the ones that are shown here. I can't remember how many images are in the zip file. But whatever additional images that you can put into that zip file and make it your own. So yeah, this is where you can add maybe your logo, or references to, and it doesn't even have to be references to GHR components. It could be links to external applications as well, that maybe you use this as a landing page for something else. The cool thing too about the configurable home pages is you can create multiple instances of these. So you have multiple points of entry, and it's just basically a different URL. So if you have multiple organizations within your setup within your system, you can have that defined by organization. So you may have organization A use one set of configurable home pages, and organization B might use something completely different. So if they're using different modules or different components, or just have different contact information or things like that, that can all be set up. And then you can also specify it down to the actor level as well.
And so another large part of your implementation project is going to be the security. So as I said before, security is delivered, and it's usually about 90%. According to organizations, some a little bit less, some a little bit more. But as you get into the system and kind of move through the project, you're going to want to have some type of a security implementation part of the project, where you define requirements and you design the security, and you decide who's going to be in the system and who has access to what, so that you can make those changes. One of the things about security is since it is a new system, and since the security is completely defined beforehand, this is one thing that will actually change as the project moves on. So what happens is people start to get in the system and they realize, hey, I don't really want user A to have access to this form or field. We need that turned off. So security is kind of almost an ongoing process till you get to the end of the project, where the users have accepted the system and you're ready to go live.
And it is a little intimidating at first, primarily because it comes pre-built. Right. So you get a whole slew of security classes and a whole bunch of roles that have all these security classes mapped. And security isn't forms and actions on those forms per se. It's access to those business classes and whatever actions are available under that business class. So you think of S3 security. We built, okay, I'm going to build a security class that has access to HR11, and I can do an inquire and a page up, page down type of thing. Right. In global HR, it's all delivered, so it's a little intimidating because you don't have that familiarity with it, and because the data model is very different, and it's not forms and transaction codes. It's right. Business classes and actions.
The key is, you would think it'd be a little easier if it was delivered, but it's actually not, because you really kind of open the bag. You don't know what's in there until you get in there and mess
you really just kind of have to get in and start playing around with it. Talk a little bit about performance tuning within your landmark application itself. So, we mentioned that process automation is kind of an integral part of the landmark application, the global HR application. So, you've got some grid tuning that needs to be done, some pre-delivered out-of-the-box configurations. Have some of these nodes kind of combined into one. node within your grid. So you definitely want to split things out, like async, which is which handles a lot of your transactional processing and direct updates to the database. But then you got LPA nodes, which handle all those process flows that are running constantly, using your routing all your action requests through approval. So you want to do some separation there to make sure that your system's really performing optimally. And along with that, if you've got multiple data areas, you may need to split out your data areas and map your S3 data area to an LPA node and your GHR data area to a separate LPA node as well. And another cool key thing here really is delivered out of the box, this core pool size value is set to 2. And what this means is basically your process automation system will actively process 2 work units at any given point in time. So anything that is, of course, sitting in a user in basket, waiting for an approval action, or is in a suspended state, maybe it's a wait node within your queue, within your process or something like that. Those don't count towards active processing, but 2 is still a very low number, so most times you're gonna need to bump this up. And again, this is all dependent on resources on your server and what you have available to you, because this will add additional memory and threads onto your server. And this is kind of hard to read, but the other key thing is your heap size, your Java heap size for all these nodes that are running in your grid. This is kind of an ongoing process as you begin to implement, and even after go live, you're going to constantly be monitoring that and keeping an eye on that to make sure your Java heaps within your grid aren't crashing, aren't exceeding memory, and causing all kinds of issues.
Yeah, I know that Jeremy gets in there and he has like a baseline he starts with when he's doing performance tuning, and then it's usually like a work in progress until we get it to right where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. So we'll talk a little bit about training. There is, because there's a lot of technology used in the global HR application and Landmark, and it's all very different. So there's a lot of training for your technical team that needs to take place. We look at, of course, you have to be familiar with process automation. We've talked a lot about process automation in previous webinars today, and it's just such an integral part of the application. Configuration console, of course, you're going to need to modify screens, hide fields, make fields read-only, set default values, so that becomes very critical as well. And again, if you're an on-premise customer, having that WebSphere, that JVM management, and that Landmark grid understanding becomes critical to make sure that your system's performing and your users aren't getting frustrated because of a slow-performing system.
So you probably need to know, which means you need to know, action requests and process flow services. An integral part of the GHR system are the action requests and how data is moved through the system from the form to the IPA to the actual loaded into the system. And as well as for your delivered flows, two Landmark nodes you'll get very familiar with are the 7650 node, which is the query, and the 8000 node, which is the update. So those are 2 Landmark nodes you'll have to know.
Yeah, they're very specific to action requests and how the system processes those. So you want to make sure as you're modifying those flows, you're not really touching those, right, because they are integral and a key part of all those delivered flows.
Right.
Look at Spreadsheet Designer. In S3, of course, there was a Microsoft add-ins product, which end users love because they could batch upload a whole page of GL journal entries in no time. And so when we look at the global HR implementation, the Spreadsheet Designer is kind of the same thing for HR folks, where they can query data down, they can do updates to positions and things like that as well. Positions, employees, all those business classes. So you're mapping your spreadsheets to business classes instead of a form or a database table. But for a system admin, this becomes a very critical tool as well, because everything in Landmark is a business class, and that includes your actor setup and your security setup and all of that stuff. So in S3, security was all pulled out of of the gen database and put into an LDAP. Well, in Landmark, it's back into the database, and so it's in a business class. So all of that configuration and all of that user maintenance, and there's a lot of security setup that has to be part of your go live, and that can all be done with Spreadsheet Designer.
Yeah, when I do security implementations, Spreadsheet Designer is one of my best friends because it pulls out the LPL code into Excel, and I can do searches and sortings and all kinds of stuff with it.
So we'll talk a little bit about the design phase now and how critical it is to be really, for your technical staff to be a part of that design phase from the very beginning.
Yeah, I'll go back to the very beginning. It is 100% involvement from all parties, IT and functional.
So your technical staff really need to be involved in these design sessions, and this is why it becomes critical that they understand the technology first as part of that early training. Process automation, hopefully more people are familiar with that as they begin these GHR implementations. But being involved in those sessions as they're talking, your functional users are talking about the design, really you can kind of help guide those requirement sessions to what the technology can do. So having that understanding of process automation, having that understanding of configuration console, what can and can't be done within the tools. Being able to set some expectations as you're going through. You want to make sure you get clear requirements from those users and document that and have it well mapped out to make sure that there's a clear understanding between your functional folks and your technical folks who are then going to turn around and build out those process flows or make those screen modifications within configuration console. Now, I just put a little tag here if you're implementing the talent acquisition module specifically within the global HR application. You want to start early with your external candidate space. There's a lot of work here that can be done. There's a lot of security considerations when you're talking about exposing something to the outside. So your candidates that come in and are applying for jobs, you're going to have to set up an external web server or through a NetScaler hardware device where you can, where that becomes then opened up outside your firewall. So this is just an example of a well-documented process from start to end, and I'm not sure which. This looks like a new position request. So it's kind of setting that expectation to know, okay, what's the system doing with the process? What is the department administrators, the compensation analysts, the steps that are involved with so who's doing what and where this process may exist. So this is the type of Visio diagram that you really want to map out for all of your business processes, for your process flow developers then to take that delivered flow and tweak it to match the business process.
And this is a picture of what we call the red-blue document. It's something that Infor provides to give you a view of what the forms will look like as the process moves through the different stages. So for example, on this one, this is a request new position. It shows what the initiator can see, what the initiator can update, what the approver can see and update, what the final approver can see and update. We like to use these as kind of a design template for when we do action request design, because you basically once you have this document, you can literally go down the configuration console and click things on and off as you need them.
One thing you want to establish early in your project is some sort of change control process. As the users become more familiar with the system throughout the development, throughout the design phase, they're going to see more and more things that they can do. You start doing some sessions, and maybe you've got a couple process flows enabled, and they're seeing how things work. They're seeing those configuration console, those screen changes that you've been working on, and they're going to just keep piling on the work, which is good. They're analyzing their business process and really optimizing the application, configuring it so that it really optimizes their business process. So you really want to kind of make sure you're setting those priorities with your end users, and is this something that's absolutely needed for go live, or is it kind of maybe a day two that we can work on afterwards, type of thing. And one thing you'll want to do too, as you look at all of these requests that are coming in, you're going to want to build in a post-go live enhancement period where your users have gone through the implementation project, gone through the design sessions, gone through some limited user acceptance testing, and then they're going to get into real world where, oh, I didn't think about this scenario, and this odd scenario comes up. And they're going to be like, oh man, if only I had this column here in this list. And that's good. You know, again, you want to make the system flexible and you want it to meet their business needs and you want them to be happy with it. And the period after go live, of course, right at go live, there's going to be some settlement that needs to happen and, you know, just kind of a calming down period, so to speak, because it's all brand new. But to have that built into your project is great because then you can really kind of address those things that they kind of discover after the fact.
One important point here is just like the security design, the system design will change. As they get into the system, as they use the system and realize what it can do, what it can't do, you know, they may not need this screen or they may want this field or they may have to interface something. So your design is going to change a little bit, especially in the very beginning stages when the users really start getting into the system.
And if you start adding additional modules within the application, you know, maybe early on a field was hidden from a particular action request, but later down the road you realize, oh, we didn't update that field and now we need to put it back on. So there's going to be changes like that as well. You know, if you build it, they will want more, and it's, you know, just as they become familiar with the system and understand the capabilities of what can and can't be done with the configuration console and within process flow. You know, there's going to be a lot. You know, just call out with process flow, probably a lot of your time from a technical standpoint will be spent there as far as the development and the build phase of the project.
And remember, you know, anything that we configure or anything that we put into process flow or any changes we make to the system will cause a trade-off. So when you deliver a CU, all those configurations have to be looked at, and all the process flows have to be looked at for is there new functionality? Did they fix something that we programmed for before? So there is that trade-off. Two ways to alleviate that is very good documentation of your configurations and your process flows, as well as a good change control process. So and CUs are released quite often. So it's not like S3 where you can just go patch the GL10 or GL20. You actually have to take a CU, which causes wholesale changes to your system.
So testing, of course, once you've got all that build done and configuration stuff done, and you're now ready to go into your testing phase. So, of course, everybody loves testing, and we talk about it, and end users just kind of roll their eyes, and everybody rolls their eyes, right? Because it's a good time.
It's not.
But one thing that becomes critical here within this is, again, you want your full technical support with the testing. What kind of support? Well, you need your process flow experts because that's so integral to this application. You need security because, oh, I can't do something. Oh, it's because you're not secure. You don't have the security to do it. Or maybe I have too much and I see this and I shouldn't be seeing that. You're going to want somebody there that knows configuration console because, again, maybe you get into that and you realize, oh, you know, we accidentally locked a bunch of stuff and it's read-only and we can't edit and we need to make it editable. So those types of things that really just all need to be there to kind of go along with it.
And so when we say all need to be there, we mean physically in the same room. The best testing that I've seen is when you have the functional team on one side of the room and the technical team on the other side of the room, and they're both working together to fix things and work through those issues that come up in testing.
And maybe with a couple of Nerf guns inside.
Well, maybe not Nerf guns.
So all of this work, all of the build and all the preparation, now we're ready for our final weeks before, so our cutover, our go live planning and execution. So we want this to go as smooth as possible. By this point, you've gone through all of the steps. You know everything that needs to be done. You should have a pretty well documented script what needs to be done from a user perspective. So there's a lot, it's not just users and security. You have to give users specific HR organizations to have access to. You have to map those users. Similar to S3 security, where you're associating a self-service identity, there's a similar concept within global HR. So there's that. You know, you have to talk about your data area preparation. So this is all, again, part of your product line strategy. So where your pristine build is and prepping for conversions and you know, your final configurations and things like that. You should have your timing down of all of these steps and loads and things like that. You know, like I said earlier, you know, Spreadsheet Designer becomes a critical part of a lot of this information for sure, and what needs to be done.
Yeah, the cutover script starts from day one. As soon as you start your pristine and your conversion and all those builds, you want to, you know, as IT, you need to be writing those steps down, and you know, it will slow. By the time you get to the user acceptance testing and into your go live, you should have a very good idea of what you have to do on go live day or before go live day.
So speaking of go live, this is what go live should look like.
Yeah, we travel. So.
Yeah. No, you really want to set up a command center on your go live. So, you know, an example would be, you know, help desk, kind of a branch extension on your help desk that's really dedicated to this product, because especially depending on the size of your organization and the activity that happens within your organization, you may have a lot of call volume coming in with just, hey, I used to be able to do this and see this here, but now I don't know where it is. And so you're going to run into those things, or you're going to have process things that they just don't know how to do and don't know where to find the help that they need. So setting up a command center, and again, this is a combination of your functional and your technical folks to be able to look at the system performance, to make sure the grid is performing, make sure you're going to start seeing work units being triggered now for all that stuff that you've built, and monitoring those, and maybe you're going to see some errors that you didn't think about, some scenarios that need to be caught and handled. So there's going to be a lot of interaction between your technical and your functional experts, and that your team, your implementation team, is really your experts set to handle all of those calls before and document things that may come up, and maybe it will require some changes, or maybe it'll require just some more documentation on how to do things. But this command center really becomes a key part of your go live to help ease the transition for the users. And then of course we talk about post live. So you know, there's kind of a stabilization period right after you go live, and so what does that mean? Well, there's the ongoing support. So from a system admin perspective, and this, you know, could be various roles, but one of the biggest things you're going to have to monitor is your work units. So if you're familiar with process automation, you should be familiar with looking for failed work units and, okay, figuring out why did it fail? Am I missing something? Again, those odd cases that you didn't code for within your process flow. So you can't have these action requests go in to trigger a process flow and then they fail. And then somebody says, hey, I submitted my change pay rate or for my employees and it never happened, where is it? You know, so you got to keep an eye on these work units as well. Async, I mentioned earlier. Async is it kind of handles all of the back-end processing. So your transactions as they get written to the database is all handled through a series of async queues and different functions within the system. You want to be out here looking for failed transactions, especially, you know, we mentioned effective dating within GHR a little bit ago, so kind of everything's effective dated based. So, you know, I can enter a change pay rate for somebody 3 weeks in advance, and then at that date the system will automatically update it, so no more running PA 100 to process actions. You just set that effective date, and when that date comes at midnight, the system goes out and looks for all those things and processes those. Well, sometimes those transactions will fail for whatever reason, so you want to keep an eye on those and reset those, and it's just something you need to be aware of. You know, I talked for on-premise customers, you know, you've got the landmark grid that you need to, like I said, continually monitor. You know, you're looking here at this particular snapshot, looking at the various nodes, the various heap sizes. You know, you can see warnings and error messages and grab the information right from the logs here. And this becomes critical, especially as you start adding additional modules and functionality within GHR. Keeping an eye on your performance, because as when you start seeing these grid nodes, their heap sizes maxing out, they're going to start crashing and restarting, and it's going to kick users off, and users are going to get upset. So you really got to keep an eye on that. And this is kind of, Chip mentioned earlier, this kind of an ongoing thing, and you can tweak these as you kind of go along and make modifications. This was a screenshot of a go live at a particular client, right at go live. This is that same grid, or that same client, but a year later, after adding a couple additional modules, specifically the performance and goals and the compensation modules. So there's a lot more activity in the system. So we had to add a lot more memory to the nodes and some more nodes for load balancing, just to handle the workload that's coming in. So that's where it becomes really a continual effort to monitor and keep an eye on your system. And with that, we'll turn it over to any additional questions.
So while we wait here for questions to come through, and certainly we encourage them, please do take advantage here of Chip and Jeremy. Maybe we could talk a little bit very briefly about, workload and work effort is something that we get asked a lot by our customers is, what does this footprint look like? And, there's certain things that we always say, depends on how much some customers are more willing to take on more of the conversions, more of the RICE components, and that can make a big difference. That said, there are tasks that you can't offload to the consultants. And a lot of the things that we talked about here, from your sysadmins to your network support, those are things that you're going to have no matter what, right? And even if you have your consulting company developing your configurations, for example, or doing your security modifications, you're going to have to own the system afterwards. So you want to be trained early, familiar with those technologies, aware of you want to be involved in all this stuff, even if you're outsourcing some of the heavy lifting, you would say, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely true. The thing about it is this is like normally a new system when you first get it, and most of this technology has not been used by anybody. You're going to depend very heavily on your consulting team in the beginning, and then slowly learn the system and move away from your consulting team towards the end. But to your point, there are those things that we can't do. We can't handle your backend database. Your DBAs do that. We don't know your network. We can't do things like that. So that's why it's important to have all those groups involved from the very beginning. And then from a landmark technology standpoint, training up front, working through the IT staff needs to be involved in those issues, because the best way to learn the system is to actually get into it and start messing with it. So you get involved early and do troubleshooting and stuff like that. By the end of the project, you'll have a pretty good idea of what you're working with.
Sure, I got some questions here. How long are you seeing typical conversions take? I assume that means an iteration. To
develop, obviously kind of depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from S3, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a slam dunk, but you know those fields very well. It's the same type of fields in Landmark. As far as like the actual time a conversion should take, that's very dependent on the amount of data you're trying to convert. But I've seen it take as little as 5 or 6 hours to 12 hours. It just depends.
So it also depends, because some people they're doing the GHR standalone. Some people are doing some of the other like benefits at this point and so forth, and that sometimes entails a little bit
If
extra.
you're coming from S3, you've got this single system. S3 is your single system for all that data. If you're coming from other pieces and parts, then it becomes much more complicated.
All right, here's a question we don't know the answer to. Approximately, but we're gonna take a stab anyway, right?
Okay.
Because it's fun. Approximately how many clients have upgraded from S3 to GHR? I'd say there's a considerable amount out there.
You probably don't.
No, yeah. At least 50, maybe over 100.
So here's the thing. It's not technically not an upgrade. It's
Yeah, it's
literally,
not.
GHR is an HR system. S3 will still be your payroll. If you're not going to 11, it'll still be benefits. If you don't use absence in GHR, it'll still be absence. So it'll still be your financials. It'll still be your procurement. So you're literally just taking the HR out of S3 almost.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, as far as the system goes, and I can't speak to how many Lawson customers are using that, but there's, to Chip's point, you've got two systems essentially that you've got to manage and maintain, and so it's a little extra work.
So here's a good question. Since our other modules are still in S3, which display, HTML5, Java, Applet, etc., is best / supposed to be used within Mingle?
So, well, with Mingle, the whole point of the Mingle component of the Infor portfolio is that it brings all your applications together, right? So your S3 applications are accessed through that globe icon within Mingle. GHR, both the HTML5 and the Java, the rich client applet, they're just plugins that get configured within your Mingle environment. So they're just additional icons across the top to access the application, no matter which interface you choose to use.
Yeah, and kind of on the earlier slide that when Jeremy pointed it out, the difference between the applet is the applet's dependent on your browser Java. HTML5 doesn't really have any browser. There's some browser version numbers that aren't supported, but for the most part, it's just a browser based.
Yep.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys very much for an excellent presentation. I want to congratulate you. It's very, very hard to stand up here and not dance, and these guys are like statues. They're so freaking good.
We were told not to.
No, it's very exciting. Obviously, great presentation. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend, obviously.